Well, tonight on Battleground, I'm delighted to be joined by Oliver Hartwich. Oliver Hartwich is a Wellington-based economist who runs the New Zealand Initiative, the country's sharpest think tank. He was born in Germany and worked in Britain and Australia before moving to New Zealand 8 years ago. Like me, he's deeply troubled about the direction the country has taken under Jacinda Ardern. As he wrote in The Australian recently, in all, the picture that emerges is the country is in precipitous decline. That would be alarming enough. What makes it even more so is a perception that the core private and public institutions lack the understanding of the severity of the crisis or the ability to counteract it. New Zealand needs to be careful not to turn into a failed state. That does not mean it should expect civil unrest, but a period of prolonged and seemingly unstoppable decline across all areas of public life. Well, Oliver, they're strong words. Do you resile from any of them?
No, I think I was still putting it diplomatically. But anyway, great to be with you, Nick. Yes, I've been here for a decade now, and I've seen New Zealand change almost beyond recognition. The country I moved to in 2012 was actually a fantastic place to move to, especially from Australia. I came right out of the chaos of the Rudd and Gillard years. And when I arrived to New Zealand, I thought I had found a home, because I was, for the first time in many, many years, you mentioned I lived in Britain and Germany before that, and Australia, of course, I was living under adult government with John Key and Bill English, and it felt great. But what we've seen here over the last 5 years, the government of Jacinda Ardern has completely changed the country beyond recognition, and I think New Zealanders are now slowly waking up to the crisis that is thrusted upon them. We have a problem in fiscal policy where our government has spent way too much during COVID. We have a problem in monetary policy where our Reserve Bank has lost its way. We have a problem actually with race relations because this government is now trying to divide New Zealanders into Maori and non-Maori, something that wasn't really there when I arrived 10 years ago. So this country has problems on every single level. We can talk about the education system, we can talk about the housing market, we can talk about health, we can talk about free waters. There is not a single area of public policy in New Zealand these days that is not in crisis.
Well, first let's go to some of the structural issues, because a democracy needs strong institutions and conventions to keep it in check. 3-year elections every 3 years, of course, we've both got those, and I think they're very helpful. But then in Australia we have a constitution, we have an upper house, we have a federal system where power is divided between state and Commonwealth governments. You, of course, have got none of those in New Zealand. Is that part of the problem? Is too much power concentrated on one government?
Yeah, basically the way the New Zealand election system works, the electoral system works, is it's an elected dictatorship. So for 3 years, if you're in power, you are in power, and there's very little stopping you. So there's no federalism in New Zealand. There's very limited local government. There is no constitution, at least not a written one. There is no constitutional court. There is MMP, at least. That's the electoral system, which New Zealand inherited from Germany almost 30 years ago. And that normally stops the excesses of power because it binds parties together into coalitions. It is very unusual, almost unheard of under MMP to get a one-party government, but that's what New Zealand got in 2020. As a result of COVID, New Zealand had an election in 2020 in which New Zealanders voted for Jacinda Ardern's Labour Party and gave it an unprecedented absolute majority in Parliament. That was not supposed to happen under MMP. And basically it means that Jacinda can now govern without any checks or balances. We get 3 years of pure Labour, and unfortunately the country and the country's constitution isn't really made for that.